But in the first hour, I want to bring this right to home. And that is, should we regulate the hedge fund and financial services industries like the Europeans are trying to do? Now this may sound wonky. Let me bring this right down to where the rubber meets the road. Right now, Chrysler had everything in place to avoid bankruptcy, a bankruptcy that might wipe out a portion of the, or perhaps even all, but most likely a portion of the pensions of people who used to work for Chrysler, who took a pay cut in order to have money put into a pension fund for them, that may reduce the health benefits of those pensioners, of those retirees, that may further reduce the pay and benefits of workers, that basically is going to screw the American worker. They had it set up to not do that, to avoid that, to avoid a bankruptcy that would cause that to happen. That bankruptcy is being forced on Chrysler today. And who is it being forced by? The U.S. government? No. Barack Obama? No. The government worked out everything, no problem. The big banks? No. It is 40 hedge funds. Now, hedge funds, that two-word noun, or phrase, that pretty much didn't even exist before Ronald Reagan became president. The idea of creating a company whose sole purpose was to make money gambling in the market, betting on and betting against things at the same time, in other words, hedging your bets, was not only considered weird, but in some ways was illegal before Reagan changed the way that the SEC regulates things. And these hedge funds that are holding Chrysler debt, many of them are holding Chrysler's bonds. Part of this deal was just like with GM. They went to the bondholders, the people who own the debt, and they said, you're going to exchange your bonds for stock. And the original deal with GM was you're going to turn in your bonds and you're going to get 10% of the stock in GM. I think it looks now like they're going to get something like 58%. They're going to get a chunk of stock in GM in exchange for their bonds. So a similar deal was offered to the Chrysler bondholders. And these hedge funds are saying no, not going to do it. Now, the reason why they're saying no appears to, nobody knows for sure. Nobody's going to say, nobody's going to go on the record. But the reality is that many of these hedge funds own two things that would cause them to say, to hell with the workers, to hell with American industry, to hell with the business of creating things. We just want to make money with money. Number one, they're holding stock, or in some cases other instruments, debt instruments and things, in Ford and other car makers, maybe some of the Japanese automakers. And so if Chrysler goes down in flames, their other investments become worth more. And two, many of these hedge funds are in all probability holding credit default swaps on their bonds. So they loan Chrysler $1 billion. They've got $1 billion worth of bonds, one of the hedge funds, for example. And then they go to AIG and they say, we'd like to buy insurance on this $1 billion that is owed to us by Chrysler. And so, we'll give you $1 million on the insurance on the $1 billion, or whatever it is, whatever the price is, whatever it's going for at that time. They buy the credit default swap for a relatively small amount of money. If Chrysler defaults, goes into bankruptcy and defaults on that bond, they get to write off the loss from the bond, so they don't pay taxes forever. They get a tax loss, and B, they get paid off on their insurance, on the credit default swap. So their bet against Chrysler pays off to them. They make a profit on that, plus they make a tax advantage from Chrysler going down in flames, and so the workers at Chrysler get screwed so that these 40 hedge funds can make a fortune. How did we get to this? How did we get to a system, to an economic system in the United States where you've got companies? I mean, look at what is happening with the newspaper industries. Look at what's happening in the radio business. Look at what's happening in television. Look at what's happening in manufacturing. Look at what's happening in retailing. G.I. Joe's, this happened just recently. I mean, one example of hundreds. You've got companies that come in, these equity companies. You know, Mitt Romney is famous for making his hundreds of millions with this. They go in and they buy a company with debt. And then they say to the company, this debt is not our debt, it's your debt. And so you have to pay off the debt. You have to fire a third of your employees. You have to work 60-hour, your employees have to work 60-hour weeks and be paid for 40-hour weeks because we're calling you management employees or because we're no longer enforcing labor laws in the United States. You have to pay off the debt, and when you've paid off the debt that we incurred to acquire you, we own the company, and the debt's paid off. This is how 3 times in his life T. Boone Pickens went from being broke to being a billionaire. This is how Mitt Romney went from being moderately wealthy to being worth $400 million. And the Blackstone Group, KKR, I mean, there's a whole bunch of these companies that are making fortunes, not to mention all the hedge funds that are making fortunes either betting against American industry, as in the case with these 40 hedge funds that are forcing Chrysler into bankruptcy today as we speak, betting against American industry, or leveraging debt to buy companies and then saddling those companies with that debt so that those companies have to operate in ways that are, frankly, screwy, so that the new owners can buy a new mansion. This gets even more bizarre. Another dimension to this, the bankruptcy bill right now. They're trying to rewrite the bankruptcy bill. And we mentioned this yesterday, and I didn't have all the details. I had a caller. He said, "Wait a minute. If I write a mortgage for somebody and they default or they go into bankruptcy, are you saying that they should be able to write off the entire bankruptcy and keep their home?" And I didn't know how it was written. I have since educated myself with some help from David Sirota. In fact, I talked with him this morning about it on the air on our affiliate in Denver. And in addition to some poking around on and reading the bill, here's the deal with the bankruptcy bill. And this is, again, what I find so bizarre is that we have a number of conservative Democrats, as well as all the Republicans, who are fighting what they call cram down, which basically says that if you go into bankruptcy and you have a mortgage on your home, the bankruptcy judge has the power to say, the mortgage on this home is for $220,000, but the home is only worth $200,000. So as part of the bankruptcy, you now owe $200,000 to the mortgage holder. Or you still owe $220,000, but the interest rate is going to be reduced from 9% on the ARM down to 4%. In other words, they have the power to do that. Now, here's what's bizarre about it. Right now, bankruptcy judges can do that on a second home, on a vacation home, on an investment property. In other words, if you're a millionaire or a billionaire and you own 2, 3, 5, 10 homes and you go into bankruptcy like Don Trump did with his Trump Tower or with his operation out in Las Vegas, I think it was. Either Las Vegas or Reno. You go into bankruptcy, you can have that loan renegotiated. For millionaires and billionaires, this is already in place. But Ben Nelson and these other conservative Democrats, and Arlen Specter as well apparently, are saying, but not for average people. No, we can't have that for average people.